Hey guys, yes, we're here another episode of Pub Talk, episode 4, talking about pub players versus pro players. I want to talk about this topic because every time that I play on the Reddit team that I help organize and lead, there's always a few people that say, Dasgro, your band of Reddit players really aren't a band of Reddit players, they're all a bunch of pro players, all playing that have tons of competitive experience. You're playing against these little bitty teams that aren't that good, and it's just one-sided. And I want to take the opportunity to set the record straight on this. But before I go into it, I want to talk about some definitions here, because oftentimes you'll see people say, oh, I'm a pro Battlefield player, or I'm a competitive Battlefield player, or other things around those lines. Let's talk about what a pro player is from a game perspective. Traditionally speaking, when you hear the word pro player in the esports category of gaming, like StarCraft, Counter-Strike, League of Legends, Heroes of New-Earth, this game, it refers to people that play this game for a living. Now, even though that makes sense, okay, I play the game, I make some money through some method, and then I win, and then hooray. And the reality, though, is that most quote-unquote pro players in esports barely make enough money to get by, which is why I don't think it's a good definition to say only pro players who make enough money to live off their earnings from playing the game should be called pro players. I don't subscribe to that idea. And if you look at a lot of pro StarCraft players, the ones that aren't in the top 5, they're not making that much money. They're making more money off the YouTube and Twitch TV stuff than they are from actually winning tournaments. And those are good revenue streams for them. But still, not a whole lot of money. But let's talk about what I mean about pro players. I don't even like to use the word pro because I think it's too incendiary. I like to use the word comp or competitive players. In my mind, a pro player or a competitive player is simply someone who strives to play in an organized match with fellow players, teammates, and try to be the best. Try to play the objective. Try to win it out in various tournaments and leagues and ladders against other teams who have a similar goal and see who the best is. And what does that really mean? How does that really differ from pubbing? Well, for one, when you play in these organized matches, competitive play, when you play in it, all these variables about a random guy doing something that's stupid or not conducive to winning the game, it's not there. You're removing all those elements away from it. And so it's just you and your teammates versus an opponent and their teammates, and that's what makes it so fun. Because you can really experience the Battlefield game a whole lot more because it's a lot more coordinated. You have that communication, you have the VoIP, you have all these things that make it so much fun. It's so much more enjoyable than having to worry about all those sort of factors that you don't have any control over. And how is this that much different from going to pub? Well, when you play in pubs, a pub player is trying to do the same thing. They're trying to have fun, they're trying to play the objectives, but they also may want to do other things. They want to get medals, or get unlocks, or rank up, or get new camo. And these are all fine things. We're all trying to have fun playing the game. But in my mind, the biggest difference between pub players and pro players is that pro players view competition as the end game, as the end state. They are trying to play against the most proficient, most competent, highly skilled players that they can compete against because they enjoy the difficulty in playing against these players. They enjoy not necessarily losing, but they enjoy improving their skill constantly so that they can know that they are really a level beyond other players out there. And maybe it's an ego thing, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of comp players out there who have huge egos, and so that's certainly a factor. However, the mere fact that they want to be able to subject themselves to potentially losing is something that I think is quite a bit different compared to a lot of other people who play the game out there. You see, it's not about KDR, it's not about win-to-loss ratio, it's not about accuracy, it's not about score per minute. To competitive players, it's all about winning matches. Winning organized matches that are within a given league or ladder or tournament. And you do this by scrimmaging. And by scrimmaging, you play each other and you try to play against other teams to get better. It doesn't matter how well you do. It's all about trying to get better. And I'm going to tell you something right now that is not often said publicly. The difference between a pro player or a comp player and a pub player in terms of raw talent really isn't as big of a gap as people think there is. And note that I use the word talent, not skill. And that's because the big difference between the two is determination of how much effort and time a pub player is willing to put in to become a better player. Now, I'm not saying that all pub players are inferior pro players. Not at all. It's just intention. These competitive players are constantly subjecting themselves to more difficult adversaries at every rung that they go up as they get closer to these tournaments. They're playing against some of the best players in the world. Even if you're a pub player and you want to be a really great Battlefield player, the simple fact that statistically speaking, when you get into a server, you are going to encounter a variety of players, a majority of them being, by definition, average players. You're not actually going to be able to compete against really highly skilled players in the process. You may experience them, maybe once every so often, but never a bunch of them on one team where you, yourself, have an equal assortment of good players on your own team. In reality, what happens is that you don't really play against that good of players, and as such, there's no need for you to play better because you're able to win enough as it is based on your level of skill. And that's what really is so different about the Reddit team. You see, the Reddit team has some pro players on it, some comp players that have titles, myself included, but a vast majority of these players are just Redditors who joined and wanted to play and have fun. And over weeks and then months of time and effort and practice, some of these guys could easily be on top competitive teams. No doubt in my mind. And that's because it's not about some kind of master race of pro players and their inherent skill and talent associated with this game. No, it's just about dedication and practice, learning the maps, learning appropriate fire control with the mouse, learning how to communicate with your fellow teammates in an environment that is ever-changing, and understand all the situational awareness that's also going on with the game as you're playing it. This stuff takes time to do. It would be no different than looking at two different pro quarterbacks, and you said, this one pro quarterback is going to throw a football 100 times a day for practice, and the other one's only going to throw a football 100 times a week. Which one's going to be better, all things being equal? Well, it's going to be the one that practices more often. And that's what separates highly talented players from highly skilled players. Raw talent is good and all, but you have to practice. You have to dedicate the time to it. And just because you may have put in 200, 300, 500 hours pubbing in Battlefield 3 doesn't actually mean you're practicing. Even getting up various ranks and unlocks and medals doesn't necessarily mean you're practicing. It just means that you've found a way to accomplish that objective and do it how many iterations you need to, and then voila, you have this achievement. That doesn't mean you're actually improving your skill set. You're broadening it, no doubt. You're learning new weapons and things like that. That's cool and all. But it's about honing your skills. Let me tell you about another team that I had worked with a long time ago. Back in Battlefield 2, my gaming team, 20AD, was contracted to help a smaller team that was going to be playing in the Cal Open League, which is sort of the amateur league that you can play in relative to the Invite League. And this very wealthy team leader said, 20AD, I have a lot of money, I'm going to pay you guys a few $100, and if you can teach my gang of amateur players who are very casual in nature, and if you can get us to the playoffs for this tournament, I'll pay you a certain amount of money. And if you get us to the finals, I'll pay you even more money. And if we win the finals, we'll pay you even more money. I'm not going to go into the details of how much money he paid us, but it was nothing to scoff at. And this team was nothing special. It was just average players that had varying degrees of talent, had varying amounts of time they could dedicate to it. And we went in and we show these players the ropes and how to play the game properly. We figured out areas of weakness and strengths and try to capitalize on those strengths and minimize those weaknesses, and also just train them more generally. How to read minimaps, how to use guns, how to maneuver through maps, how to use vehicles. And we taught this team for probably a good 2 months straight. 3 or 4 times a week, maybe a little less, depending on what it was. And we did individual basis, we did it as a team, we scrimmed against them, we would mix it up. Not surprisingly, at least I didn't think it was surprisingly, that team won the championship for that league. We got paid pretty handsomely too. But the point is that this is not some kind of exclusive club of pro players, and that only pro players are these breed of people that are untouchable. No. Anyone can do it. Anyone can play. It's all about mindset. Putting yourself in the mindset of saying, I want to be a better player. I am going to reduce the variables that I usually play in by playing an organized, competitive play against competent players, both with my teammates and against opponents. And I may lose, but when I lose, I'm going to learn from that, and I am going to become a better player. So, that's the pub talk for this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll be doing more. I'll see you guys later. Hey guys, yes, we're here another episode of Pub Talk, episode 4, talking about pub players versus pro players. I want to talk about this topic because every time that I play on the Reddit team that I help organize and lead, there's always a few people that say, Daskro, you're banned of... Because oftentimes you'll see people say, oh, I'm a pro Battlefield player, or I'm a competitive Battlefield player, or other things around those lines. Let's talk about what a pro player is from a game perspective. Traditionally speaking, when you hear the word pro player in the esports category of gaming, like StarCraft, Counter-Strike, League of Legends, Heroes of New-Earth, this game, it refers to people that play this game for a living. Now, even though that makes sense, okay, I play the game, I make some money through some method, and then I win, and then hooray, Reddit players really aren't a band of Reddit players. They're all a bunch of pro players, all playing that have tons of competitive experience. You're playing against these little bitty teams that aren't that good, and it's just one-sided. And I want to take the opportunity to set the record straight on this. But before I go into it, I want to talk about some definitions here. And the reality, though, is that most quote-unquote pro players in esports barely make enough money to get by, which is why I don't think it's a good definition to say only pro players who make enough money to live off their earnings from playing the game should be called pro players. I don't